Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for the 30th of October 2013. And joining me for this edition of the podcast is AVForums assistant editor Steve Withers.
That's no moon, that's a space station.
Games editor Mark Botwright. Hang on, I thought we were doing Twister.
We are doing Twister, I'm f***ing with them because that's a quote from Twister.
Right, okay.
From Star Wars.
Right, okay. Games editor Mark Botwright.
The finger of God.
And audio reviewer Ed Selley.
Honey, your car is in a tree around the corner.
So welcome along to another weekly AVForums podcast. A bit special this one, as the new design is now up and live if you haven't already seen it. Go and have a look at the pink and the white and the black, and the feedback forum's there for you to complain, and that's about it.
Well, it's not only there for you to complain, but if you feel the urge to, you can make your opinion felt. Ideally, don't blame us.
In all seriousness, the site is now live. It's a whole new editorial and forums layout, new forum software, which will take a little bit of getting used to. And I've been there thinking, where's this button and how do I do that? But it is quite intuitive, Zenforo, and it is a damn sight quicker, and the stuff that you can do with it is so much better than V-Bulletin. I think people are going to love it. You just have to give it a little while, I think, to find out where things are. And in the feedback area, there is a whole post, a whole thread, telling you about all the features and where you can find them and so on. So if you're having problems, that would be the first place to go. So it's taken a lot of hard work. In fact, I'm struggling to speak. I'm that tired at the minute and trying to put a sentence together. Although, that's usually what it's like every week, but never mind. So, Steve, you were away at the weekend. Nicely timed, I've got to say. 10 points for effort there. Getting out of the way while it all hit the fan.
The man who sprained his ankle the day before D-Day.
Yeah, this is Steve. Oh, by the way, did I forget to tell you I'm going to Edinburgh this weekend? Anyway, thoughts?
Well, I think minor teething problems aside, it looks fantastic. We've always emphasised that we've got fantastic content on AV4, and the problem is that people haven't always been able to find it, or it hasn't presented in the best way. That is no longer an issue. Now it will be very much up front and centre, easy to find, and it looks fantastic. And I, for one, love it because, I don't know about you guys, but when you're writing something in your mind, you have this kind of vision of what it's going to look like. And in the previous iteration of AVForums, it didn't necessarily look like that. Particularly for things like articles, which were just basically posts. Now that things are starting to look the way I always thought they would look, and I think it's fantastic. Hopefully people will agree, but certainly from my perspective, it's a major step forward for AVForums. I
guess we've been working on this for months now, and we've all been able to see what it's going to look like and see what the design is like and all the rest of it. I guess we kind of forgot that it was going to be a massive change for people when the site went live again on Saturday night. A new design, and then trying to figure out where everything is and so on. You can understand a little bit of the negativity, Mark, reading through the feedback forum, because it is a big ask, especially when we change everything at the same time.
Yeah, I remember when you showed us the kind of prototype shots of it, and it was very much, it is night and day. We've gone as far away from the old design as it's possible without turning the site into a giant turnip or something. But the tools are there behind the scenes for us to be able to present editorial content in a much better way. There's also a lot that hopefully should come to fruition with regards to the forums as well. And I'm as guilty as anyone. I'll moan when something changes. I've done it to other sites as well, and I feel guilty for doing it. When I look back, the amount of times that sites have changed and I've uttered the line, I can see myself not coming back here. I do it all the time, particularly when anything changes. I've got to say, away from physical buttons to any kind of drop-down menus, I've absolutely kind of thrown a hissy fit at times. But it's sooner or later I've eaten humble pie and kind of seen exactly why it's the way it is. I think there were always going to be teething problems.
Yeah, it is one of these things, and we've got to remember that, I suppose, because we have been looking at this for months, and it is a bit of a culture shock. And of course, on this podcast here, we're very editorially heavy, So that's the one area that we're always going to discuss. But Ed, you are a forum ninja. You get yourself stuck in there. You like arguing with people. You're always right, of course. What do you think of the actual forums?
To be honest, I've been more detached than you guys from the actual development process. So it was, I mean, obviously I'd had a sneak peek, so to speak, but I have to say, I mean, we were discussing before we went on air, the first sort of hour, it didn't help that we went live after a period of sort of time offline in the middle of X Factor, where I think a large quantity of people were looking for something else to do. Literally after the first hour, everything is sped up. For me, it's going like the clappers. I think that the most important thing to remember is that for me, the site already looks pretty damn good. The next thing to remember is that obviously the site that we've just moved on from was the culmination of sort of years and years and years of evolution. As best as I understand it, we haven't even begun to turn some of the really sort of interesting features on. And start to adapt it and make it evolve to the requirements of what we need. So there's even after a couple of days, I'm perfectly happy with it, and there is so much more that I know that we can do with it and tinker with it. And I mean, obviously, I have to say I haven't spent much time looking at it on a phone, but the one that's really puzzled me is the comments about how it's not working correctly on sort of tablets and other devices. I've been tinkering about with it on those, and I have to say it looks pretty damn good. But that said, I've always loathed Tapper Talk, so maybe I'm not the person to talk to. But in terms of my ability to continue to argue at random with people, no, I'm a happy camper.
We are looking at the feedback from our listeners and our members, and rest assured that your feedback is taken on board, and we will be looking at things as we go ahead. And as Ed said there are on the forums certainly functionality that needs to be added in, and certainly with the editorial as well. There's lots of things still to add there which we think you will love once they are up there and running. Stuff like being able to compare products and so on. You're gonna really like the functionality there. But enjoy it as it is at the minute, and rest assured that as the days and weeks go on, it is going to develop, and we're going to have another podcast special probably later this week, so keep your eyes open for that, where we have the whole development team on board, discussing how things have come together, how we've gotten to a launch point, and obviously talking through some of the functionality that is going to come. So keep your eyes out for that special edition podcast. Moving on, let's go to hardware news. And talking about the community, talking about the forums, Sony invited forum members to go along and have a look at their new 4K projector, the VW500ES. This is a breakthrough product at a breakthrough price. It's £8,800 retail, full native 4K projector, really getting a lot of interest on the forums. Forum members went along, Steve, to Sony Music HQ, and were given a demo of this.
Yeah, Phil, that's right. I mean, I think it's worth remembering that AVForums is a huge community, and manufacturers place an awful lot of emphasis upon that and a lot of importance on it, because our membership, is very clued up. They're enthusiasts, and they have a wide knowledge base. They have a high disposable income, and they're usually well educated. So manufacturers want to know what they think of products, particularly products that are, shall we say, at the higher end of the price bracket. Now, whilst the VW500 is a game changer in terms of price for a native 4K projector, and you consider the only other one available currently is nearly £18,000, so it's literally half the price of the VW1100. That's still quite a lot of money, £8,500. So, yeah, Sony had this event at the Sony Music Centre, which is in Knightsbridge. And they invited along forum members. They gave a demo. They gave a quick demonstration on an overhead projector, talking you through how it works, talking about the technology, the changes that have been made between what was the VW1000 and now the VW1100 and the 500. Specifically, they had the actual guy from Japan who designed the optical array, and he explained how they managed to. Because previously, the big problem's been that you can't use plastic lenses. You need the kind of the accuracy and the consistency of glass in order to deliver a 4K image, and that was the case with the VW1100 and VW1000. I mean, they had an 18-piece all-glass optical array, and that is where a lot of the money and certainly a lot of the weight on those projectors goes. They've managed now, after a lot of effort and time and obviously money, to create a glass front piece and then a plastic optical array of 13 plastic pieces that can deliver sharpness and accuracy and consistency for a 4K image. And that's been one of the reasons why they've been able to make the VW500 at a significantly lower price point than the VW1100. So we had about 10 members there, and their opinions were universally positive. They all were massively impressed by the native 4K content. Sony showed basically some demo clips, most of which I'd already seen before, and then they followed it up with a Blu-ray to show the upscaling capabilities of the VW500. Strangely, they used Avengers Assemble, which is not a Sony film, but the members all said they thought the 4K content looked stunning, and they said they all basically agreed that you could easily tell the difference between 4K and 1080p on a large screen. That the level of detail was absolutely, gobsmacking. One guy said he blew his socks off. Another guy said that, it gave him a real dilemma in terms of what he's going to do in terms of upgrade. That he might sell his current projector. In fact, he said he'd sell his wife and kids to get one. That's how keen he was. They all thought that the upscaling was quite impressive as well. Reality creation seemed to be improved from last year. Some pointed out there was a little bit too much sharpening, but you can adjust that in terms of reality creation. So, I think it was worth remembering that what they were watching was not exactly an out-of-the-box image, but I knew that projector could look even better if properly set up, calibrated, etc. I thought it was actually the one I saw at IFA was a pre-production. This is a pre-production model, and the actual production model will be shipping in a week or two. I have to say, I think they've made some minor tweaks, certainly in terms of motion handling, since I saw it at IFA. I thought it looked absolutely stellar. I have to say, a really, really impressive image from that projector.
Can I just say, the fact that he said he'd sell his wife and kids to get one doesn't necessarily mean he rates it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. He might like his wife and kids very much.
Anyway, so that's the Sony event. The article is up on the front page of the forums. Go and find that. It's called 4K. There is no such thing as UHD. Bit of a strange title. Quickly explain that one, Steve.
Well, the reason I called it that was because at no point in the entire presentation or any point in the entire evening does anyone from Sony ever use the term UHD, which, for those who may not know it, ultra high definition, which has generally been agreed upon as the marketing name for 4K. Sony are very adamant it's 4K. Their view is that you should be using that term and not UHD. I think partly because, if you want my opinion, 4K is a bit more catchy than UHD, and I think calling it ultra high definition might be confusing to the consumer. But also, of course, Sony are massively involved in 4K from every aspect of production to distribution to presentation. They own a film studio, they make the cameras, etc., etc. So their view is it's 4K, not UHD.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think 4K works better from a marketing point of view to the public, just by the fact that you can say it is 4 times better than HD.
Yeah, exactly.
And it works from that angle. So I can entirely see why Sony are doing that.
Plus, they're familiar with that term from going to the cinema, because you quite often see 4K projector being used in the cinema. Don't
Joe Kane wants to call it 2160p. From a technical point of view, I can see where he's coming from, but you got to remember, you got to educate the consumer. You can't call it 2160p. That'll just, that's just going to really confuse people.
Sounds like a So Solid Crew song. It does.
Yeah, and Ultra HD. Yeah, we had the whole HD ready, full HD debacle when HD.
There's a worry when you just start adding letters to already existing kind of acronyms and the like.
Well, it's funny you say that, because the next subject we're going on to is OLED or OLED from Samsung. And Samsung famously did the whole LED TV thing, and there's no such thing as an LED TV. So they did this whole thing. It's going to be interesting how they're going to sell OLED, because the poor public are just going to see a letter in front of LED and think it's an LED TV.
Yeah, I think they really have shot themselves in the foot from a marketing perspective, having spent the last 5 years trying to convince everyone they're buying a brand new technology when they're not. They're buying an LCD TV with an LED backlight, but they're calling them LED TVs. Now it's OLED, and the O obviously stands for organic. The marketing campaign has obviously picked up on this because it's got life in every pixel, which is trying to, I guess, emphasize the fact that it is a slightly different technology and it uses an organic material. But I think the consumer is going to find it confusing, and maybe that's why the current first generation OLEDs are curved, because it makes them stand out from the normal LED LCD TVs.
Well, it can't be for any other reason, Steve.
Other than the fact, well, because they can.
There's no technical reason for it. I mean, Ed, what's your opinion on this? You know, OLED, OLED, LED TV, they're going to have issues, aren't they?
I can just envisage the conversation a couple of years ago where there would have been a group of engineers and product managers who were saying, I think this is a bad idea to start talking about LED TVs in LED backlight LCDs in this way. It's going to cause problems going on. And I've been a marketing manager. I didn't enjoy doing it, but I've been one. And I have every confidence that essentially the marketing department would have just been warned about the long-term issues about it and gone, but no, there's short-term benefit to differentiate from what everyone else is doing. Let's just do it. And now I'm sure that the same marketing people, if they didn't all get sacked in the recession, will be there going, oh, well, you know, I'm sure we'll find some half-assed and ill-thought-out way around it. But yeah, they squandered an opportunity for short-term gain a couple of years ago, and honestly, I don't quite know how they're going to reconcile that. I'm quite glad I'm not a marketing manager for one of these companies at this point, because in the pursuit of sales a while back, they really are going to have a job of differentiating it now. And I suspect that a number of companies are really just going to sort of, I think their initial thing is going to have to be to play to 4K. Which means that the standard HD OLEDs are sort of going to be confused and sort of, if you like, hard to market. And then I guess they'll have to think of something new and shiny once they've sort of 4K OLED is more of a default technology.
I guess you're absolutely right, Ed, but I think they're going to take one look at their sales numbers for the last years and think, well, bothered. You know, they have sold an awful lot of LED LCD TVs. And people have been buying them because they did think they were new technology, even though they weren't really. And they were super slim and looked really cool until you turn them on. So I guess, you know, that was their goal, and it succeeded. Now they have got a slight problem in terms of brand recognition or technology recognition.
Yeah. Before we get into how it actually looks, because Steve's got one at home. The other flip of the coin is how salespeople are going to sell this thing, and with the Curve. And we put a tweet out this morning about the curved phone, actually, from LG. But we said, all screens are going curved. What do you think? And an interesting tweet back from someone who was in JL, I'm not going to say the whole name, where an employee told him that the curved screen is because of improved viewing angles and also so the light from the edges reaches the same time as the centre.
That's exactly
where does he live? The disc world?
No, that is.
Is he viewing through his goldfish bowl?
Samson told me that.
Right.
Like, okay, and if you're sat at a very specific point, right in front of the TV.
I don't know. My past includes, with it staying within the bounds of legality. My past includes the ingestion of some interesting chemicals, but at no stage do I think I've seen light move at different speeds. I'm pretty confident that that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, like we said in previous podcasts. I mean, the whole thing about curved screens in cinemas is because it's projected light, and the way it falls on a huge screen, you are going to get uniformity issues, and that's why the screen is curved. So the light from the projector hits the screen at different points, but then it looks uniformly the same colour of white and the same amount of brightness. That's why cinemas have curved screens. The reason some cinemas with really big screens, yeah, and like, I mean, Cinerama. It was 180 degrees.
Good example.
But curved screens, like in the really big IMAX theatres and so on, the reason they're curved is so that the light hits the screen at the same at different points, but it looks the same in terms of brightness. There is no point in having a curved TV other than it looks cool. That is the only reason to have a curved TV, and you are going to introduce issues for people sitting off axis.
Yes, absolutely right, Phil. It is purely an aesthetic choice. It's nothing to do with picture quality whatsoever. And I did ask Samsung, you are planning on launching some flat versions, aren't you? And they said, yes, we are. Next year, there will be flat OLEDs as well, which obviously means that you can hang it on the wall, because you can't hang these on the wall. I mean, they are attached physically to the frame, and they aren't. There's no option to wall mount. It's a design aesthetic, and you're right. Once you sit off axis, you are aware of the curve slightly.
Right, so go on. What does it look like? You've been lucky enough to have one, although you buggered off for the weekend and left to sort of do the work and stuff. But you have got one. What do you think?
It looks fantastic. I think it's a really, really great TV. You got it, starting from just the aesthetics of it. The curve. When you look at it, you think, oh, it's quite curved. It's not. Actually, the curve of the screen itself is minimal, about 5%. The curve of the frame is slightly more, which gives it the impression it's slightly more curved than it actually is. The panel itself is quite deeper than they could make very, very like 4mm deep OLED screens, but they said they didn't. They deliberately made it thicker than that because it makes it more robust. The actual frame and the design is gorgeous. The frame itself includes a speaker, so they're forward-firing speakers, so it sounds fantastic. For a flat-screen TV, it sounds beautiful, really, really good. In terms of its features, they're state-of-the-art. It's got all the features you could possibly imagine on a TV. It's got the reference standard setting Samsung Smart Platform. So that's fantastic. It's got 3D, and the 3D is absolutely brilliant. Totally no crosstalk whatsoever. It's got dual view, which means you can watch if you want to. There's only me in the house, granted, so I haven't tested this out yet. But theoretically, you can watch two different things simultaneously, even two different 3D images simultaneously. It comes with two pairs of glasses to do this, obviously, but they can be used for 3D as well. The only difference between these and the normal 3D glasses are that there are little speakers built into them, which you can plug into your ears, little earbuds. If you're watching two different things, obviously you don't use those for 3D, but if you're watching two separate things, you could use that. There's built-in camera. Then we get the picture quality itself, and the big thing with OLED, black levels, absolutely total black, absolute black. The dynamic range is spectacular. The contrast ratio, awesome. Color actually seems very good. I haven't done any real testing on it yet, but this is just my impression from viewing material. It looks incredible. It's been a long time coming. It's been a troubled birth for OLED. I think Samsung have played it a bit cooler than LG by not launching anything before they could. Now it's there in my living room, and I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, yes, this is the future of television, the future looks good.
That dual screen thing.
Yeah.
Is there any more definite way of saying to people around you that your relationship with your partner has reached a level beyond any form of help or counselling than a television where you put glasses with earphones in and sit side by side watching two different channels of television?
Maybe it will save some failed marriages, Ed. That's the solution.
Oh, what? So you just live together? What? You're staying together for the kids, or because you can actually sit there and watch the two?
Isn't that most marriages?
Ooh, contentious. I don't know. It just smacks of despair. Really does, really badly. But maybe that's just me.
Like you're sat on the sofa and with you both have your little TV helmets on.
Yeah. It really. I'm sorry. I'm sure. I'm sure it's very clever. The technology sounds really clever. I remember having a demonstration of that the screen in Range Rovers. Where the driver sits there and sees the sat nav, and then the person in the passenger seat can watch television at the same time, and that's without glasses, which is very cool. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic technological achievement. I think socially, that's just one of the most depressing things I've ever heard.
Can they not just rebrand OLED in its proper state? Would that not be possible?
Sorry, what do you mean in its proper state?
As in, rather than LCD with LED backlights, now that the lines have been blurred so much and we don't have that much on the market, could there not be a push just to kind of try and differentiate what will be coming?
Sorry, you lost me.
I'm saying call proper OLED something else.
Oh, you mean they're going to say publicly, sorry, we've been bullshitting you for the last 5 years, but actually what you've actually got is an LCD, but this is what you really want now. That's the same boat that LG found themselves in.
I don't know. That seems to work quite well for Apple.
I think what they could do is they could just call it organic TV.
That's what I'm saying. Just elongate it slightly. Just amend it slightly.
Plant TV.
Orgasmic TV.
That's a great marketing line. Hey, I'll tell you what, it's pretty orgasmic too. I felt a little bit stiff at times.
Yeah, well, you get this nice TV and you start watching Babe Station, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I hate to think what your test material's like.
Television.
Well, you got to test the flesh tones, so, what can you do?
Well, there's no natural flesh tones on Babe Station. It's all a group of.
Well, no, I've never watched Babe Station, but I was thinking of some more of my esoteric Blu-ray collection.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you did live in Hong Kong and Japan, and so yeah. Okay.
Oh, so
I just point out that I didn't say that. That like you did.
Anyway, so that's the Samsung OLED TV. Steve's got it in for testing and reviewing at the moment, and it will be up on the new AVForums front page
At some point.
At some point, if you can actually get on and start writing about it. But let's aim for the end of the week, Steve, and see where we are when we get there.
Can I just say, what does the new look forums look like on it?
I don't know. Actually, that's a good question. I haven't done that yet.
Yeah, at least you can. You know.
Very bright, I'm thinking.
Are the pinks pink?
Yeah, is the pink? No, the pink's magenta.
Yeah, it's not pink. It's ecclesiastical purple.
I just envisage it being sufficiently white, Steve, that you just melt like a Nazi at the end.
Anyway, less of this silliness. Let's move on to games next. So let's move on to games news. Mark, the Wii is finally discontinued in Europe. I'm surprised at this. What's this all about?
Well, it's still going to be available in the US. Basically, it'll still be sold, but there won't be any further shipments of stock. Though they've got the Wii Mini out, which is a kind of budget version, cut down version, and you can play on the Wii U. So, you know, you're still well catered for there. But in many ways, I mean, the Wii U kind of shows exactly why you shouldn't rebrand things too closely to something, a standout product from before, because it has confused a lot of people. But, you know, it's the end of an era. It's the Wii hit, I think it was about 100 million in sales. You know, I mean, people talk about where the PS3 and the Xbox 360 were in a race with each other, but a lot of people tend to forget that the Wii won this generation at an absolute canter. That it you know, kind of software support died off a few years ago, and still it's so far out in front. You know, Nintendo could completely bomb this generation, and they would still, you know, be living off the riches of the Wii. And yeah, it's from its launch in 2006, it kind of reshaped gaming in many ways. So yeah, very much the end of an era, and fingers crossed as motion control slowly dies off in the background, Microsoft will take note and shelve their Kinect.
I was wondering when you were going to get that in there. But yeah, I'm going to pick up on a point here because, as you know, I'm not a big gamer. I try to keep myself in the loop because I have to, because I'm an editor of the site, so I need to know what's going on. But this was one product that did stand out and cross the generational gap, didn't it, Mark? This is the one console where people who wouldn't go and buy an Xbox 360 or a PS3, they went and bought a Wii because it was more of a social machine to use at parties or with the family and that kind of thing, because of the whole motion control and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it gave you, it was something new, it was something innovative, but I think more than that, it was also the fact that, you know, Nintendo's been working on kind of streamlining control input methods, and with the Wii, you know, you've got this wand, you've got this little nunchuck, you've basically stripped it all back. So beyond, whilst everyone else is looking at adding, you know, 12 button controllers, having more buttons, having, you know, things added on, they'd stripped it back so that a lot of their games were designed around kind of contextual inputs. So, you know, one basic button would do the majority of commands, and that's just really, really simple for people to be able to pick up.
I always sort of envisage the Wii as the console for games console for people that don't play games, basically. And that's why the Wii U bombed so dramatically, because those people had already moved on to playing games on other things like tablets or phones or whatever.
Yeah, that's
they
exactly
were never
it.
Truly gamers, and therefore it never really mattered to them anyway.
I'd say I wouldn't go as far as to say they weren't truly gamers, because I think that it's become kind of such a kind of stratified pastime that, you know, in the same way that someone doesn't have to, you know, go to the cinema 3 times a week to be considered, you know, a film fan. In the same way, I think, you know, lots of people just play games in whatever way they find the easiest. And I think the classic flaw in any other companies chasing, motion control is assuming that those people, 90 odd million Wii owners were up for grabs. That somehow, right, well, if the Wii U bombs, then those people will go for the PlayStation 4 or they will go for the Xbox One. Those people aren't there anymore. They're playing on their tablets. They're, as you said, they're playing on their mobiles. They're not going to go over to a £400 console. They're not switching in that way. The people who were happy with the Wii are perhaps going to still stick with it, and most of them have just switched over to the iOS model of cheap games with touch input.
I do think there's one thing we have to remark on with the Wii. I don't think any other single console in history has killed as many televisions as Nintendo's baby. I know two people who killed televisions, one of which was a Pioneer KRP500 by managing to muller a control through the screen. And years and years and years ago, it's actually sort of stopped being updated now, which is a shame. There was a wonderful website called A Bit Broken, which listed just appalling eBay auctions. And it just used to be so many pictures of people trying to flog televisions with a big dent in the middle of the screen where a Wii remote had actually come into contact with it. So, I don't know if there was... I'm amazed that at no point anyone tried to do a lawsuit for it. But, as I say, loads of people killed tellies with Wii remotes.
But the Panasonic actually used that in their marketing, which was quite funny, a few years ago for their plasma TVs. And they actually had the thing where at the convention where they were actually throwing things at a plasma screen just to show how strong the screen was. And they had one set up where there was this weight that would fall onto the middle of the screen and then move itself back up again and then drop again onto the centre of the screen just to show that they were Wii ready.
Well, as I say, obviously my friend with the Pioneer would disagree that plasmas were immune to it. Although that said, I think he was apocalyptically drunk when he did it. Like all good, really expensive things, though he wasn't in clear and sound mind. So,
they had to start making it very clear that people should actually use the little kind of wrist strap.
Yeah,
because no one bothered with that to start with, and it was perhaps looking back, the sleek aesthetic of it was beautiful, but a kind of shiny, very kind of slippery remote after your hands got sweaty was perhaps a poor idea to begin with.
We are still talking about the Wii here, aren't we? We're still talking about the Wii.
Yes, we're not on to Steve's special interest yet.
Although we haven't talked about this, but how did it become successful when it was called the Wii? That's a stupid bloody name.
I remember it basically...
Brand awareness.
If you remember thinking back, I mean, there was a huge amount of derogatory press about it. And I have to admit, I've never got on with it. I don't play computer games to move around. I play computer games to sit very still. But there's no ignoring the fact that, there was a lot of derision, and then people started using it. It became a bit of a phenomenon. And, I think it has a very important place in gaming history. But I was never a huge fan of it. But it was a very ingenious solution to not having the sort of hardware, the processing hardware, to keep pace with the arms race of what was going on between Sony and Microsoft. I thought that was a very neat solution to a glaring problem.
Yeah, it was massively derided at the time. People assumed that it was going to, be completely trounced. In the same way, though, they did assume that, with their handheld, with the Nintendo DS, people assumed that the PlayStation Portable was going to absolutely ruin it. And then, it showed there's a reasonable market out there for people who don't necessarily want to be at the cutting edge, for whom graphics and presentation isn't the foremost thing in their mind.
Yes,
I have to say, it also killed one woman.
Really?
How? Yeah. It was a terrible story to start with. There was because there were huge stock shortages. There were lots of people running competitions to get your hands on a Wii. And there was one, I think it was some kind of radio phone-in about how long you could go without urinating.
Oh, I dimly remember this.
In the States, and this woman's bladder ruptured and she died.
So they actually did connect Wii with having a Wii?
Yes, exactly.
I didn't know the Americans even used the term Wii. I thought it was an British thing.
You've got me wondering now if it's apocryphal.
Snopes will tell you.
It does sound apocryphal because I don't think your bladder explodes. You just piss yourself, don't you?
Why don't you
Ultimately,
Yeah, Steve, that's
15 pints of lager and a wet bed in the morning.
that's your challenge for this week, Steve. See how long you can go with
Go
it.
for a slash.
Yeah. So that wraps up games news. Come back in a sec. We're going to talk tech. So moving on to tech news, Apple had their big launch last week for the new iPads, MacBook, Mac Pro and Mavericks, among other things. And I got to say, the fact that they gave stuff away for free was excellent. As an Apple owner, MacBook owner.
Oh, slightly desperate, if you want my opinion.
Well, no, I think they've played a blinder, actually. When you look at the whole Surface thing and how much money you have to spend on Microsoft's software, I think it's actually quite a clever move by them, especially Mavericks being an operating system, giving that away as a free upgrade. And I have to say, I haven't spent that much time with it, but it is better battery life on my MacBook Pro. The other thing that drew my interest was the Mac Pro, and it's only $3,000.
Yeah, I've got to say, that was a surprise. I thought it would be a lot more than that.
I mean, I'm saying
That's
only
$3,000
$3,000
US, which is, I don't know, would be in UK, probably something
Probably $3,000 in the
similar.
UK.
Yeah, it's going to be $3,000, isn't it?
But for such a powerful machine, and it is the most powerful that they've made, and it did get me wet thinking about it.
That's a horrible image. Thank you, Phil.
Oh, what? So you being priapic on your own in front of a television is somehow fine, and no one else is allowed to sort of derive the same slightly unpleasant excitement about an inanimate.
So what?
a special Wii. I'm not talking about a games console.
But yeah, hitting that at $3,000, and it was a pretty good spec as well. I mean, as you know, with Apple, you really have to go onto their online store to really spec it up. So it's the best that it can be, and then you're spending a lot more than $3,000. I haven't done it yet, but I've got a sneaky suspicion that if I go in and configure it to how I would want it, you're probably looking at double that.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I think that the whole software thing is part of Apple's appeal. Is that, whilst their hardware has always been quite pricey, a lot of the software is either very cheap or, as it is now, almost free, if not literally free. But I watched the whole presentation and I just felt like there's not a lot of innovation going on here. It's just fine tuning existing products and then giving stuff away because they've got nothing else.
But is there any point in them innovating at the minute, Steve? This is the question, and open it up to everybody on this podcast. Is that what we want? Because if you look around the marketplace, is anybody else innovating at the minute, or is everybody else just playing sort of catch up and introducing little bits and pieces here and there? I think the important thing for Apple, and I think they've played a blinder here, is with the iPad. The iPad has been a massive success, huge success, probably the best success that they've ever had. And the clever thing that they've done now is they made iWorks free and they made iLife free on the iPad. So you buy an iPad now and it has all the productivity tools that you need, and it has all the photographic stuff and all the rest of it. You go and buy a Surface, does it have that? If you go and buy a Nexus, does it have that? So
that's what I just said. It's the giving away the software has always been, or cheap software has always been one of the great advantages of buying Apple kit.
Now that they've got the product and the product is in the marketplace and it's actually driving the market, the iPad, I think they've played a blinder by giving the iWorks and iLife for free with it. Because now why would you buy anything else?
Got to say, that's only on new ones, by the way. I couldn't do it on my iPad.
It did say in big letters, Steve, in the presentation, free with any purchase of new Mac.
Well, then just give it to me as well. I've got one already.
Well, actually, if you've got an iMac, you should have been able to get notes.
I got the free. No, I got the iWork and iLife upgraded.
We'll stop your bloody complaining. Right, moving on.
Yeah, right.
What do you other guys think?
I mean, ultimately, there's been any number of articles about this. One, yes, you're right. In the absence of significant innovation from competitors, there's no onus on Apple to do anything desperately revelatory. The other thing is it's been harked about for best part of 2 years now. We are hammering up against the limitations of what batteries can deliver for these all singing, all dancing products. I mean, yes, I said this before, it's very possible that you could make you could do some sort of weird, Princess Leia-esque sort of hologram effect from your iPad, but if it means that the battery life is measurable, on an egg timer, there's absolutely no point. Unfortunately, this is where the technology industry becomes where no one player can make the required difference here. We are banging up against the laws of energy storage as we know them, and we're going to need to do something a little bit more ambitious if we're going to start doing anything truly revelatory from where we are now. And I'm not conceited enough to say that we won't. This is not an end of history moment, but we need to take stock. And essentially, even a company as all-conquering as Apple is going to have to wait until some incredibly clever industrial chemists somewhere find a way of giving us more grunt from energy from dry cell or wet cell batteries.
I mean, for Apple, predominantly tend to drive consumer lust from a design point of view. Functionality is definitely a massive part of it. We know that, but it's the design, it's the pictures, it's the aesthetic that tends to get a lot of the big headlines, as we saw with the Mac Pro. I think when it comes down to things like with tablets and with smartphones, the problem is that everything is about streamlining that input. And now you've got a touch screen that works perfectly. You can't really bolt anything on there. You can't really amend that design to any great degree that anyone could really see. I mean, with Microsoft Surface tablets, people thought, well, perhaps a keyboard, and then it just kind of fell flat. If someone really wants a keyboard, they can put it on via a case. There's no great need for kind of any fantastic speakers to slot onto there. You're using a tablet for basically ease of use, smaller things that you wouldn't necessarily use. If you wanted to do anything more, you'd go towards your laptop, you'd go to your MacBook. So they don't really have to revolutionize anything, and there's not a great deal. There's not much wiggle room for their competitors to actually do anything. If their competitors do anything and bolt anything on, then that, in many ways, that almost reinforces Apple's position as these people of gurus of minimalistic design. They're sticking with this kind of ideal.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Mark. And that's the thing that I never got about the Surface. It was like, look, this is a tablet, and putting it on a keyboard, it just didn't make any sense. Because you're trying to get three products in one, which is not what the iPad's about, really. At the end of the day, is it? I mean, it's about using in your hand and being able to, and you can type on it quite easily, quite surprisingly easily. So I don't see the need for the keyboard and stuff. And it's like people are trying to copy Apple, but trying to add their little twist to it, and it's not working because you don't need it.
No, which means that ultimately, if someone wants to try and trump them, then it has to find some way, via more software-related means to do so. Find some way to make their products more interconnected with better apps, or in some way. But kind of iTunes and the App Store has got such a huge head start on most things. I mean, it's surprising how far Android has come. It's surprising how far, the Google Play Store with regards to, things that I might stick on my phone has come. But by the same token, it's, there's still a long way for anyone to be able to actually dominate that market.
I mean, Apple are at an interesting point, though, because if we ignore the truly committed, I'm going to use the phrase truly committed because it's not litigious or offensive for people who, every time there's an announcement, they will go out and they'll buy the latest and the greatest, and they're happy campers.
Dressed as Steve Jobs.
Well, if the black turtleneck is still doing the goods, then that's good for them. For people, the tier below, and I suppose I put myself in that category, the evolution rather than revolution that we're seeing means that I'm less inclined to change stuff until it actually goes wrong. I'm not going to, looking at the iPad Air, it's nice, but I've just ordered a coat for 600 quid, so I'm not going to buy a.
You've ordered a what for 600 quid?
A coat. Well, a jacket, more technically, but.
Does it come with a car?
It doesn't. No.
Does it come with a
tablet in the
laptop?
pocket or something?
No. It's a coat. Gentlemen, buy cheap, buy twice. It's my
What?
grandmother's.
Yeah,
Who
but-
makes
yeah,
this
yeah,
coat?
but 600
I wanna
quid
know.
for a coat.
Yeah,
It's
all right,
made
yeah.
by the. It's made by the Shot Company of New York. It's. Hold on, I'll find you a link for it.
I don't know.
600 quid. Yeah,
I'm
so-
expecting
I-
a
I knew-
gentleman's overcoat of quality here.
I nearly fainted when I paid 200 quid for 2 North Face jackets in Vegas.
Most I've spent is about 140, I think.
Look, I'm basically working on the principle that for the years to come, I will be buying children's clothes at a rate that is just depressing. So these things are effectively immortal unless I set fire to it or lose it.
Right, I'm gonna. Have
That's got a very 70s Serpico look
Hang
to
on.
it.
Well, I am, as you know, something of a retro fiend. So
right, we're
but
gonna
more
have
to
to
the
attach.
I won't be buying an iPad Air because my iPad 3 is good enough to see me through this phase where I've dropped this money on a coat instead. And
What the
that's,
hell?
Apple hasn't delivered something to me which is making me
so
change.
you're paying 600 quid because the collar can be worn up to provide excellent wind protection.
No,
Does
I'm-
it come with buttons?
2 outside slash pockets? What are those? Are those so you can have a pee in your pocket?
That's for his food poisoning.
Hey, hang on. It's got one inside pocket.
look, it's an unbelievable.
It's actually
nice
called
coat.
the pea coat. That's
Yes,
what the slash
it's-
pockets are for, is it?
I can't take you anywhere. This is why we can't have nice things.
It's a very nice coat, but I think you could get similar for a lot less. Than
A lot
600
less.
quid.
Yeah,
Let
it's
me
a
tell
lot
you a
of
little,
money.
let me
for
tell you a
a
little story
coat.
about these.
I never
These are
had
these-
you down as a hipster.
The Shot Company in New York, basically, they have the tender for the United States Navy. So they make this coat in wool and they make it in leather. Now, they've been making the leather one since, I think, 1947. And there are examples of it from 1947 that are still completely wearable and in still completely perfect nick. So I'm buying an immortal coat, all right? Provided I don't get too fat for it. That's a big if.
You are the perfect PR man's dream. You really, yeah. Make up this history a bit.
But if you're buying a coat that's going to live longer than you, then you're passing that on to someone else.
Oh, very
You're
possibly.
paying for something.
Just
that's going
ask
on to
Steve
someone
Jobs
else.
about that. I mean, you might find Black Pearl next slimming, but frankly, he went too far, didn't he?
Well, that as well. But no, I don't. I'm sorry, I don't see this. I mean, obviously, it's not an inconsequential sum of money, but it, as I say, it's a quality garment, and it's made by salaried, happy workers in the first world, and not children in the Far East. These are things that you pay for.
It's got to be about 25 quid a button.
I don't see what I honestly don't see what the issue is about this.
No, it's fine. I think you'll look very nice walking
Ed,
along with your
what-
pimp cane and everything.
Yeah.
Ed,
You want a wide-brimmed hat
Huggy bear,
and a white Cadillac.
snakeskin shoes.
It is funny though how we prioritise what we would spend our money on compared to other people, and how we equate prices. Because you look at that at 600 quid, and the first thing I'm thinking there is not a coat. I'm thinking what else I could spend that 600 quid on.
Oh yeah, you're right, Phil. I'd happily drop 10 times that amount on a projector without blinking an eye.
Which will be obsolete at a point where that's beginning to
Yeah,
look.
totally. I mean, we have,
because I'm going to buy a VW500 and that's 4K, so I'll be fine for a bit.
but yeah, we do. We do. I don't know if you do it, Mark. Do you? Where you look at something and you think, oh, I could spend that on other things.
Oh, definitely, but not on a coat.
It's normally when I have to spend money. I mean, for example, I've got to get the car's cam belt changed tomorrow. And yeah, when I'm handing over the money for that, I think I could have spent that on something more exciting than a piece of tooth.
Yeah, but
rub.
your cam belt's more important than a jacket, Ed.
This is true, yes.
I put everything in price terms. I always price it in terms of Blu-rays. So like, that was 3 Blu-rays. I'm not paying that.
Yeah, I was like that back in the Laserdisc days. It was like, how can I not spend on other things so I can go and buy some Laserdiscs at the weekend? Talk
Yeah,
about wasting money on
it's
things.
a sad, desperate addiction, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, our listeners know that. I mean, AVForums. You come to AVForums, your bank account just disappears. Because of the classifieds, because of stuff that we talk about, because of the technology, you tend to spend money. I certainly did when I first started the forums. Always buying and selling stuff and always out of money.
Nothing's changed there then.
Well, no, the forums now works on a principle where it occupies so much of Phil's time he's unable to buy anything except immediate requirements, just food and periodically cigarettes. Otherwise, there's no free time for him to spend any money.
Yeah, I don't get that, right? I don't leave the house apart from buying food and cigarettes, yet I've got no money. How does that work?
I know the answer to that question, but I don't want to say it in public.
I don't know. I'm spending a lot of money on nappies at the moment. That's a depressing way to spend money. I've got to be honest.
That's 3 Blu-rays.
Nappies and pea coats.
You can do that, Matt.
Is that why you went for leather? It's wiped clean.
I've got to be honest. It was a consideration. Yes.
Yeah. Ed, your kid's equivalent to 10,000 Blu-rays over the course of his 18 years.
Yes, he is.
Cool. I know I'd rather have.
He doesn't have quite the same obsolescence issue, and let's face it, 10,000 films. They can't all be Theodore Rex, can they, Steve? You know, there's going to be some dross in there as well.
At the Sony event, a couple of the guys were asking me, "Where's the Theodore Rex review?"
Well, they've got a point. Where is it?
Well,
You were going to buy it.
because they wouldn't ship to me because I was in the UK from Amazon US, and I objected to paying more than tuppence halfpenny for the bloody thing in the first place.
All right. Well, I've got some friends stateside.
I was just going to say, anybody listening in the States that wants to buy this for Steve and forward it on, we will reimburse you for doing that.
Make me review it.
No, you're reviewing it.
Using all of our new editorial features, no less.
Wasn't that going to be lead story when the site changed over?
Yeah, it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be the big story after the welcome to the new AVForums disappears. It's going to have to be a 4K TV instead now.
Rediscovering a lost classic.
Oh, hell. Right, okay. What were we discussing? Oh, yeah, tech news, right. So that wraps up tech news. Come back in a sec. We're going to talk movies. Okay, moving on to movie news. Star Wars Episode 7. I think we're going to start seeing more and more of these news stories and rumours popping up as we get closer to launch of this movie. And interesting that J.J. Abrams and Lawrence Kasdan have now taken over the writing of the script, Steve.
Yeah, originally Michael Arndt, who won an Oscar for Little Miss Sunshine, was writing the script along with George Lucas, who was giving him pointers and ideas. But now that Abrams is on board, and Lawrence Kasdan's been on board already with Disney / Lucasfilm, working on some of these intended standalone movies they're talking about making between the Star Wars episodes. But now he's come on board with J.J. Abrams to rewrite the script, which is interesting in two respects. First of all, it's great news if you're a Star Wars fan, because obviously Lawrence Kasdan wrote Empire and Return of the Jedi. And J.J. Abrams is not bad at writing script. I mean, he's a pretty established scriptwriter in his own right as well, having written a number of scripts already, plus numerous TV series, including Alias and Lost. So, I mean, that's good news in that sense. I mean, I think if they're working on the script, that's a good indication that the film's heading in the right direction. But what is also interesting is if they're working on the script right now, and it's supposed to be being released in 2015. There's no way it's coming out in 2015. I mean, they have to shoot next year. I mean, would even a year be sufficient post-production time on a film of this scale? I think we're looking at least late 2015, if not pushing it into summer 2016 before this film comes out now, I suspect.
Can I just say, I'm not excited about this.
What, Star Wars?
Star Wars?
No, Lawrence Kasdan.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean...
Dreamcatcher.
Return of the Jedi.
Darling
Ewoks.
companion. I mean, they've basically, let's not forget, they haven't kicked some chump off this set and brought him in. They've kicked off the writer of Toy Story 3. So,
that's a good point.
that doesn't necessarily signal that this is going to be an untroubled production. Lawrence Kasdan hasn't exactly been hitting them out of the park recently. Some people would question perhaps even J.J. Abrams. I just feel that this is, I don't know. I'm getting those little kind of worrisome signs that this isn't going to be quite the rebirth that we're all hoping it will be. I think they've picked someone that the fans won't get on the back of, that they perhaps might want to see do well in Kasdan, but I don't know. Recent form perhaps goes against him.
I've got to say, after the whole 99 thing with the prequels, I am not getting my hopes up for this at all. I am not going to get involved in the hype machine.
So you'll be queuing outside the cinema, but you won't be in costume.
Yes, basically yes. I am not going to build my hopes up for this because we've already been burnt with the prequels, and I know it's not Lucas that's behind this one now, and I know it's a new team and all the rest of it, but you just have to look at Into Darkness to see how quickly he tried to move that whole story on with the characters who we didn't really know, and he picked one of the most emotional storylines of the original Star Trek movies and tried to rework it, and it didn't work. So I'm a little bit concerned there as well, that he has history of doing this, where he tries to force the moment or try to force the characters. So I'm not sure. I'm not going to get hyped up about this. I want it to do well. I want it to be a good Star Wars film. But the other flip of the coin is that, we all grew up with Star Wars, and your mindset is completely different now to where it was when you were a kid. I've got to say, in the last 10 years, there hasn't been a movie of any kind that has moved me in the same way that movies used to move me when I was a kid or a teenager.
This is simply because you don't understand Fast and the Furious.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, no, I think it's because we expect more and we're more cynical as we get older. The more experience you get in life and all the rest of it, and your expectation levels maybe are a little bit higher than they should be, and you're not as prepared as you used to be to let go and get wrapped up in the movie, and that sense of going with it.
Suspension of disbelief. You know what's killed it in some ways, which is YouTube. Online videos, being able to see too much footage. There was a time when you would see a film where you'd have to be in at the right moment to be able to see a trailer. You might have caught it on TV, but beyond that, you were going in fairly fresh. Just reading about things and seeing the occasional still was all you had beforehand. Now, you have to almost actively avoid things, not to get to that level of oversaturation.
Especially trailers. Basically give away the entire bloody film these days.
Yeah, well, it used to be Saturday morning TV, wasn't it? You would see it on Swap Shop or whatever it was that you used to watch, Tiswas or whatever, and there'd be this huge build-up. They would show you the trailer for the big movie, and then you'd buy your magazines during the week. I'm trying to remember what magazines I used to buy as a kid.
It's like Starburst.
I was going to say Lucan. But when I was at
Razzle.
No. You didn't buy them. You just went up.
They
the
were
park.
found in hedges.
You just went up the park and found it in a hedge. But yeah, I mean, the hype machine was a lot less expansive and it was more focused. It was like Saturday morning TV. That's where you found out about the big film coming and you got the trailer and all the rest of it.
That's actually true, Phil. I can vividly remember the first time I saw anything from Star Wars. I was standing in a shop window in Bath looking at, and they just have a TV on in the shop window. And so the sound was down, but I could see these images on the TV. It was the scene where they're escaping from the Death Star and the TIE fighters are attacking them. And I looked at that and I just remember thinking, what is that? I have to see it. And it was ages before I worked out even what the film was, because I just had no point of reference, nothing to, no information at all other than these images on the screen.
I love the idea of you just watching dozens of films that were out at the same time going, there's no spaceships at all.
Well, no, I saw Chewbacca and I didn't know what he was. And I thought it was something to do with Planet of the Apes or something like that, because I had no idea what this was, but I just knew that I had to find out what it was and I had to see it.
I remember the whole build-up for Return of the Jedi on Saturday morning TV, and then you had the Muppet Show as well.
Disappointment.
Well, you had the Muppet Show as well, and you had Mark Hamill and that dressed up in his gear and stuff. I mean, the sense of anticipation when you were that age as well, it was just... and like you say, Mark, it wasn't oversaturated. Like it is now. I mean, you could find out anything you want to find out now. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a case of all three, getting old, getting more cynical, and just this oversaturation, this whole flood of information about everything and anything. I mean, I think Gravity's been spoilt for me, because I've seen so many clips that I don't want to see, but they've suddenly turned up on on what I've been watching or in the ad break and so on. Which is a shame because I really want to go into that movie cold and get the whole experience.
It's difficult these days to, even if you're trying to avoid spoilers and and seeing too much footage or trailers. It's just, with the way that the media saturates us now, it's difficult to do that even if you want to. Like if you go to the movies, you've got to sit through 4 trailers before the film starts.
The problem is,
say the writers.
If you're sitting there, I mean, the thing is, obviously, from a perspective of being very, very interested in films, it counts as oversaturation. From the perspective of the people doing the advertising, you're just competing with so many other forms of media that saturation is the only legitimate method of trying to get it across these days. Trying to do an actual tease release for something, be it film, be it almost anything else these days, is virtually impossible to do. I
think the last really effective, and it was the early days of the internet as well, I think the last really effective viral campaign for a movie was
Phantom Menace.
No,
Blair Witch was
Blair Witch, the Blair Witch Project. That was really excellent campaigning because it didn't give too much away and it tried to sell it as a true story, and all these websites started turning up and you sort of built a community around it. But that's the last one I can remember that really did that and really went viral with it.
But that's because they had to be smart, because it had to be closer to targeted marketing. It was almost a kind of holistic approach of taking into account what kind of people would be interested in the film. Whereas now it's kind of more of a scattergun. If you fire off enough ads, sooner or later you'll catch the person who's kind of channel hopping, and you'll get their attention.
I've got to say, up for Cloverfield, just thinking out loud. Yes, don't get me wrong. I think Cloverfield is a fairly dungy film, but again, that was quite nicely done.
There's one at the minute, which is probably the best viral ad I have seen in the last 5 years, and that's for Carrie. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's the one with the hidden cameras in a coffee shop in New York, and somebody spills coffee over the lass, and she starts using her psychic powers, and it's really, really good. On an unsuspecting public, she moves her hand and puts a guy up onto the wall. Yeah. And then she starts screaming and all the books on the shelves and stuff start flying off, and you get the reaction of the public that are in buying their coffee at the time. And but that's the last one I've really sort of seen. I mean, LG have been trying to do it with their adverts, and some of them have been really quite funny, really quite good.
You mean when the meteor crashes?
The job interview and out the window you see the meteor hitting the city and the blast wave coming towards you. That was brilliant. And the one in the guy's loos with the widescreen monitors above the urinals. I don't know if you've seen that one, but that's really quite funny as well. But yeah, it's this oversaturation, but it's trying to do something different as well to catch your attention. And I guess it just comes back to word of mouth at the end of the day, though. I still I put more value on word of mouth than anything else. I don't know about you guys, but and that certainly worked for Gravity.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it goes both ways. I guess you can either get positive word of mouth, or films can be killed before they even get released due to negative feedback on the internet, particularly. But yeah, Gravity certainly has. I mean, its box office in the US. It hasn't opened here yet, but in the US, you can definitely attribute to very, very positive word of mouth.
Right, before we go on to what Steve's been seeing at the cinema, obviously this podcast is going out on Wednesday, the 30th of October, Halloween, horror movies, our favourite horror movies for Halloween. Do you see a subject beginning to materialise in front of you? If you go to the front page at the moment on the new AVForums, and there are 2 articles by Chris that were actually released last year. And sadly, because of the way the old forum worked and they had to go in as forum posts, I don't think they really got the readership that they deserve, because they're absolutely brilliant articles. One is pre-1968, one is post-1968. It's Chris's choices of the horror movies you really have to see. And if anybody knows about horror, it really is Chris McInerney. He is the go-to man for horror. And some excellent articles in there. And guys, some excellent choices, which... some of them wouldn't be my first choice, but then some of them are movies that I've never heard of as well.
Yeah, I mean, he uses the reason is before 1968 and after 1968 is because 1968 is a watershed year in terms of horror movies. That's when Night of the Living Dead came out, and Chris's article makes it very clear that he thinks that post 1968, perhaps also because of Vietnam, Watergate, etc., but the horror film fundamentally changed. I can't disagree with many of his choices. I think they're all spot on. What's interesting is that I don't think there's anything after 1986 in the post 1968 list, which is, I think, is a bit harsh. I'm sure there's been some decent horror films made in the last nearly 30 years, but there's a couple of there's lots of obvious ones in there and some sort of slightly more left field.
Well, I'm going to say out loud, I mean, in terms of post 1986, the Japanese version of Dark Water was named presumably because that was the contents of my underwear. After that, I was decidedly unsettled watching that film. I confess I'm not a really big fan of horror movies, but no, that wasn't.
I remember being visibly upset, well, not visibly upset, but very scared watching the original version of The Eye, which is a Hong Kong movie. I'm sure Mark can back me up on this one. There's some very scary moments in that. And an interesting concept too, that someone who's been blind since birth and then gets their eyesight back has no idea what anything actually looks like, because she's never seen them, and they have to start teaching her that this is what a stapler looks like, and this is this is what this looks like. So of course, when she starts seeing ghosts, of course she doesn't know anything's wrong because she's never seen. She doesn't even know what she looks like in the mirror. So I thought it was a great film. Yeah,
no, I'd agree with that. I've got to say the only thing, just checking through Chris's list, I obviously agree with all of them. The Thing is one that I always go back to, but The Shining is probably the only one on that list that I've got to say I never really assumed it was a horror until kind of I heard people talk about it as such. It's one of those films that I always found greatly intriguing and kind of played into the mystery kind of vein of the horror genre, but I've never actually found it particularly scary.
I think it's got quite an unnerving atmosphere to it.
It's unnerving, but I do agree with Mark here that there's a difference between unnerving. I mean, The Thing, unless you speak Norwegian, in which case apparently The Thing is rubbish. The Thing is that for me that was a little bit different. But I don't know. Obviously, it's just something when you brought it up. Right at the beginning. Spoilers for people that haven't bothered to watch a film which is older than me. Right at the beginning, where there are men sort of running away from the dog, talking in Norwegian, they are in fact giving away pretty much the entire premise of the film, because they are actually talking in Norwegian and talking about the entire basis of the plot. In the same way, just as a equally delightful one, if you speak Pashtun, which that's a bit more specialist, I guess, although there are more Pashtun speakers. When Robert Downey Jr. is kidnapped in the original Iron Man, again, the people talking in the background basically give away the entire premise of the film and who's the bad guy and what he's going to do and all the rest of it, because they are actually talking legitimately in that language, which I thought was quite funny.
Although you can probably guess the bad guy in Iron Man because it's very much like
you probably can. The bald man with the beard, yes.
There are only like 3 or 4 characters, so it's the guy in the hat killed the other guy in the hat because there's no one else that could possibly be.
But more to the point, they literally talk about the entire premise of the film. It's a bit
like in Return of the Jedi, where he goes, "I've got a sister." We'll take a wild guess at who it might be, as there's only one woman in the entire universe.
No, there's that lady that hands over to Admiral Akbar.
You mean Mon Mothma?
So that I've doubled it there. And what's the chops who gets burnt in the beginning, along with Uncle Lars?
I bet Aunt Beru.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, she's not playing a big role after she's.
I don't think she could be Luke's sister, though. Really.
No, I'm simply saying that your premise that Princess Leia is the only woman in the galaxy is flawed. Because I'm a pedant, a massive.
Only major character in the films is female.
What about that dancer in Jabba's place?
Ula.
Yeah. Now that would have been great if she was his sister.
Well, I think it was better than it turning out to be Princess Leia.
And whether it
was a bit
dear J.J. Abrams.
Can you fix it for me?
All interspecies sex, please. Oh, actually, that's quite well covered in Star Trek when I think about it.
Yeah, Shatner-tastic.
Sorry, what were we talking about? Oh, yeah, horror films.
I'd love to go to one of those midnight openings, but just like dress up in costume, but the wrong costume. So go to Star Wars, but go in a Star Galactica costume.
Or a Trekkie, because a Trekkie.
Go as Spock.
Well, it's directed by J.J. Abrams, so I
Yeah.
can turn up in my Star Trek gear.
Not back on his top tips, are we?
Sorry, I've just been looking at some of these. I think I've been very restrained this time, Steve. I haven't been giggling over you at all.
Oh, you know what? A friend of mine was talking to me last week, and he was saying, on the new podcast, the weekly podcast, basically it's like Ed's the naughty boy in class who's always mucking about, and the rest of you are trying to do some work. So what do you mean the rest of them? I'm trying to do some work. The rest of them are mucking about, and the bloody teacher, in other words, you, Phil, is encouraging them.
Yeah, it was a bit like passing the notes around in class, wasn't it? Yeah, Steve is a knob.
This is good, I have to say. Play a real life game of Guess Who by asking who your wife is if she hasn't peed before pushing her over.
Daily Mail readers, club together for a flux capacitor and f*** off back to the good old days.
Oh no, this is brilliant. Confuse Geordie physiotherapists by informing them that you've knee complaints.
Spice up a boring salad by replacing the vegetables with bacon and placing it between 2 slices of bread.
Fun game. Ride a bicycle with an empty baby seat down a busy street whilst loudly saying you're being very well behaved.
Save money on expensive Muse tickets by humming Bohemian Rhapsody at a local Quasar.
Convince visitors you've won the Euro Millions by putting your heating on.
Give your telly that YouTube feel by sellotaping some semi-literate racial abuse to the bottom of the screen. Oh dear, right, okay, sorry. Are we going to learn what's at the cinema, Steve, or is it just past the time where anybody's...
Yeah, well, Steve, you can do that. We're going to read this. So, what was at the cinema?
This week at the cinema, whilst I was in Edinburgh, I went to go and see Ender's Game, which is based on a book by Orson Scott Card. And I've heard of the book, but I haven't read it. But apparently, Ender's Game was recommended in by the US Marine Corps as recommended reading because it contains useful information on leadership skills, tactics, and ethics. Although Orson Scott Card has been in the news a bit because he's a Mormon and is quite anti-gay marriage and a bit homophobic, although he hates the use of the term homophobic. And unfortunately, people have been saying, "Oh, boycott the film because of Orson Scott Card," which I think is a bit harsh because that's got nothing to do with the film or the filmmakers. And there certainly is nothing in the film that you can construe as being in any way homophobic. I actually thought the film was great. I really, really enjoyed it. It's basically it's set in the future. There's been an alien invasion. They've repelled the alien invasion, but they're worried the aliens are going to come back and invade again. So they're taking these kids and teaching them, or trying to find kids that have certain unique skills in terms of strategy and warfare, a bit like what Ed was doing his degree without the mass murder. And then you basically train them in order to use them as a form of attack for their star fleets when they have to go to war against the aliens again. It has loads of really interesting things about the ethics of warfare, and which is surprising for what is basically aimed at children. I went to go see it with my nephew who's 14. He loved it. Lots of big space battles. Harrison Ford's in it, playing a grumpy character. The kid who plays Ender is Asa Butterfield, who was in Hugo, playing Hugo. It's got some really good effects. It's directed by Gavin Hood, who's made some good films in the past, like Rendition and Totsi. And I really enjoyed it. It was exciting. It was well made. It was thought provoking, and you can't ask much more than that in an epic sci-fi movie. So I'd give it about 8 out of 10 and say go and check it out.
Was impressively succinct. I have to say it looks very good. I mean, obviously, I've got as much chance of getting to the cinema before the end of the year as I do flapping my arms and flying to the moon. But I
think you'd quite enjoy it, Ed. Given
I would genuinely like to go and see it.
It does genuinely ask some serious questions about what it is, how far you can take an offensive strategy in terms, and what it is that makes us human, and if you behave in a certain way, do you lose your humanity? So it's interesting, and also
I'm honestly not yanking your chain. I would love to go and see it, but unfortunately, at the moment, I'm in the company of a small person who needs to be fed often and regularly depooped. So yeah.
Also, even though I haven't read the book, and the book was written, I think, in the 80s. I think the premise of the film, at least, is all the more relevant now, where children are, playing video games on a regular basis, and that kind of concept of them perhaps not being able to differentiate between reality and virtual violence. Again, makes it resonant.
Yeah.
Recreate the loose women experience by simply reading "Take a Break" next to a flock of seagulls.
Annoy MC Hammer by going to a museum, pointing at every exhibit and asking, "Can I touch this?" There was a very contemporary Apple one that I thought I've lost it now.
I quite like the PowerPoint presentation one. Save time by giving everybody a printout of the slides at the beginning and then go home.
Rename the Genius Bar to the Twat Desk for proper accuracy.
It's a photo of the guy in the wheelie bin. Save money on expensive hot tubs by creating your own.
Become the English pop equivalent to Flo Rida by changing your name to Doncaster or Peterborough.
Vegetarians looking for a tasty alternative to meat. There isn't one. Eat meat, for sake.
Guys, liven up your Friday by accidentally texting the wife, "Simon, we'll have a proper Valentine's next year, I promise."
I think this one's quite smart. Write the alphabet around the edge of your ironing board to encourage ghosts to do the work for you. This is good. Enter 1471 into your microwave keypad to find out the last person that used it.
If the offer of a stuffed toy meerkat influences your choice of motor insurance, you probably shouldn't be driving.
Enjoy the sophisticated ambience of a sushi bar by strapping some peeled fish fingers to a Scalextric's car.
We read, Darth Vader convinced staff on the Death Star you're just one of the guys by wearing jeans and a polo shirt every Friday.
One for episode 7.
Again, dear J.J. Abrams.
Find out how loud your partner can scream by waking them up on an aeroplane flight wearing your life jacket and oxygen mask.
Oh, I love this one. Mark the protracted suffering and death on the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ by eating mildly spiced fruit buns.
Some of these are actually quite good. Ray Parlour. If you need extra income, open up a tanning salon and name it after yourself.
Here's one for Steve. Dating tip, Steve. Demonstrate your intelligence to potential partners by correcting their grammar in social situations.
I have done that. Does not go down well, I've got to say.
If you're behind someone at a cash machine, let them know you're not a threat by gently kissing their neck.
I don't.
Pretend you're a time traveller by asking people of the year, then whooping for joy and shouting, "It fucking worked!"
Find your sex offender name by sticking a pin in a copy of the Radio Times from 1975.
Once again, I think this has been one of our... we've done some tech news. We did, didn't we? Right at the beginning.
Yeah, we did a lot.
Oh, God, it was such a long time ago.
And then we talked about consoles that aren't being made anymore.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, that was a good move.
Because we're on it.
Convince people you're a cat by strutting around with your anus on show.
Toasted tea cakes make excellent hot cross buns for atheists. That's excellent.
Women, if there's enough room to spell bootylicious on the back of your shorts, it probably isn't.
And on Bootylicious, let's wrap up this week's podcast. Thanks very much for listening. Please do keep continuing to give us your feedback on the new AVForums. And look out for reviews coming this week, including Steve's OLED review, Samsung OLED review. So all I need to do now is thank Steve Withers.
When you used to tell me that you chased tornadoes, deep down, I thought it was just a metaphor.
Mark Botwright.
It was windy.
And Ed Selley.
In a severe lightning storm, you want to grab your ankles and stick your butt in the air.
Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Also bookmark avforums.com for the latest reviews, news and video. Plus, why not leave us a rating on iTunes if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.